Well, as a student, I'd be very keen to know what I'm paying for. And we've seen sort of, as you said, a rise in accountability whereby students can, they can now text in to complain if their lecturer is late. A number of students will calculate how many, the cost of each lecture that they are timetabled to attend. So if a lecturer doesn't turn up, they'll say, well, that lecture that I've missed cost me £68.37. I'd like to be refunded, please. In terms of comparisons with other universities, again, students will, an implication of consumerism for them is looking at their own course and other courses around the country, for the same subject, and trying to compare what it is that they're paying for to what students at another university is paying for. So that's a consideration, from the student who thinks as a consumer. In terms of a member of staff or the university as a whole, again, as a feeling of accountability, my students are now expecting a lot more from me. They're not as keen to take their education into their own hands because they feel I'm paying for a service. I'd quite like to attend a lecture and just be provided with my education. And that's, I think, a very important issue for the university as a whole to be thinking about, because unless they find ways in which to not necessarily just placate students, but to make them see the benefits outside simply consumerist views, then this trend will continue, and we will continue to see students, counting the cost of, paper that they're using in the library, books that they're taking out, free materials that are available. They will literally be counting the cost of every day of attending a university.
Well, I think the question is, are there any implications? I think there are, and I think they're very serious indeed. I'm going to quote again, this is Macmillan and Cheney from 13 years ago, thinking about the idea of the student's consumer, and even back then they pointed out that the student's role in the production of learning is de-emphasised, and thus learning itself may be diminished. Students who have internalised the metaphor of the student's consumer tend to act in a passive manner. As a teacher, I can generate materials and provide them to students. That's not hard to do in a way, but I'm not sure that people really learn anything very new that way. And thinking of the work of Meyer and Land and their work on threshold concepts, things that are really hard to learn, that are transformative, irreversible and integrative, that's their words, that once understood have an effect on student learning and behaviour that occasions a significant shift in the perception of a subject or part thereof, a perspective that's unlikely to be forgotten. I would like to think that when I'm teaching, those are the things that I want students to be doing and learning. I think this troublesome knowledge, as people have called it, is best learnt through inquiry, through creative activities, through the practice of the discipline, as Kay said earlier on, with time, space, freedom to fail. And I think once you position the students as consumers, provided with knowledge by the teachers, you're completely withholding those kind of opportunities. I think academy as a whole is weakened as a result. As we've talked about earlier on, students can be capable producers of knowledge who bring new perspectives to university research. And Mike Neary, the founding director of the Reinvention Centre, has argued that failure to acknowledge this has disastrous consequences for society, in fact. And that can sound a bit dramatic, but Mike's pointed out that if you want to address contemporary emergencies such as climate change, you need to think about these things. It's a good example, I think. Peter Mandelson wants universities to provide highly skilled graduates to serve the very economic model that's creating the climate change emergency. And I think society deserves better from us as universities. I think we want graduates that can engage critically with the prevailing economic model, create the knowledge that's needed to move beyond it. And that has to be the students that are in our universities now. And we should be universities, not training centres. I think someone at the Times Higher said that as well recently. So yeah, I think the implications are extremely serious.
Last night I went round to a friend's house rather than come out, so sorry for not joining you, but I used the opportunity whilst I was here. And my friend was really tired, so she just wanted to sit in the house rather than go out, so we watched some television. And we watched this new programme on E4 called Misfits. It's been advertised a lot and they spent a lot of money on it. And the programme was monumentally awful. It was really, really bad and irritating. And the reason for that was it was a television programme put together by focus group. They'd clearly gone out and talked to students, like, what do you want? And they'd produced a TV. So they had plenty of characters who I thought were really irritating, but, they had the pretty one, the less attractive one, the chavvy one, the this, that and the other one. And they had storylines that just didn't make sense. And if you apply that approach, that consumerist approach to students, you'll end up with the same thing. You'll have focus groups and you'll be putting together courses that are, they may be responding to what students want, but they will be incoherent. Students won't be getting what they want out of them at the end because they're not going to be able to explore their own learning and get any satisfaction out of it. So I was going to draw that as a sort of analogy. And looking at some of the implications of this for students, I think there are two things I'll draw attention to. I think you can, if you look at the student journey, I'll put two stops in it. First of all, look at the point at which you're trying to enter higher education and make choices about where you go to. And one of the points I want to make during this discussion is that I don't think a consumerist approach is always mutually exclusive from some of the other approaches. There are benefits to both, and I think they can be applied to many different approaches. So look at when you're entering higher education. Now, recently I wanted to be able to tell the time. I'd lost my watch. I wanted to be able to tell the time. Plenty of different ways I can do that. I could buy a wall clock, a grandfather clock, a sundial, a wristwatch, a fob watch. I decided I wanted a wristwatch. Now, same when you're going into university, you've got all sorts of different subjects you can study. So you may decide you want to study French or maths or medicine or something like that. So you've got those sorts of choices. Same sort of approach you might apply. There's plenty of information you can find. You can go to all sorts of different places to find information about those. So consumerists, partner, exactly the same up to that point. But when it comes to decision time, when you're deciding where to go, I bought my watch. I bought this one. I quite like it. I'm quite pleased with it. But I've got it, and I'm stuck with it now. If I change my mind and decide actually no, maybe a sundial would have been better for me, or a stopwatch would have been better, I can't really do that. Whereas in higher education, if you don't apply that pure consumerist approach, you can be more responsive to students. So you can make those mistakes and make changes. Perhaps you can tweak your change a bit, or perhaps you can make a huge change. And that's important if you're going to empower students to be able to make the right choices and study what they want to. And then I'm looking at towards the end of your journey through higher education. When you come to the end and you get you achieve your qualifications and you've developed as a person, it's not the piece of paper you get from the university at the end that's the product with your degree marks on it. It's you. You've gone into university, you've immersed yourself in that education, hopefully you've made the most out of it. You can't at the end of that go back and say, well, I'm not happy, can I have another me, please? Which, with my watch, if the watch isn't working, I can go back and have another one. So I think that's some of the implications of having a pure consumerist approach that we have to be mindful of if we apply them.